Nature reminds us about so many things, especially the blossoming of a flower and how allowing we have to be with patience to just let things unfold and to mature in their own time. And there's a beginning and there's an unfoldment and there's a maturation of growth of the process of blossoming. It's simply beautiful. And speaking of beginnings, Genesis continues to tell us how God moves and how God moves in and through the mind of human. In other words, it gives us the eternal creative process by means of the 7 days of creation and the 7 Kemetic principles. Through the parable of Adam and Eve, it tells us how we fall from both our position, meaning our Garden of Eden, our true creative process through the misuse of our free will and how our emotions can be deceived by doubt and eating from the tree of good and evil. And by eating from things that slowly poison us over time. And we learned about the warped Adam and the warped Eve and what happens when we allow our consciousness and our emotions to be deceived. Now, as we continue to move through this story, I wanted to talk about this, especially from a esoteric and a metaphysical perspective. Although there are only 66 books of the Hebrew Bible, and we know historically that there are over 6,000 books written, within those 66 books, there are still 6,000 promises that God promised to the mind of man for us to have life in abundance. And the story of Abraham is an allegory that shares some of God's first promises. And there is historical evidence of Abraham actually existing. Unlike some other characters, the family of Abraham belonged to the Semitic tribes that migrated from the neighborhood of Ur, South Mesopotamia. His people they were highly civilized people. They lived in well-planned cities. They worked in bronze. So this was during the Bronze Age. They used potters. They used a potter's wheel. They had very accurate systems of weight and measurement. They cultivated science and astronomy, the exact science of the cosmos. Abraham is known as the father of the Hebrews, the descendants of those who settled in the land of Canaan. As we understand the story of Abraham, we also understand that the name Jews was given to them around the Babylonian captivity, which was a 4,000-year period. And all Hebrews were in captivity at the time were from Judah. During the story of Abraham, those were the particular ones that were in captivity at the time. They were particularly from Judah, which half their kingdom was destroyed, and that other half being Israel. The kingsmen in those days were the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Armenians, and the Phoenicians. At one time or another, Abraham's descendants were in captivity by all of these kingsmen. So we can rule out through historical facts and deductive reasoning that none of those kingsmen were Hebrews. If they were the ones that were captivating them, right? They obviously couldn't be captivating themselves. And so based on their intellect and location and what I personally saw when I was in Kemet, that 99.9% it's highly likely that these people during this time were melanated, such as all people were from that particular demographic location. So based on deductive reasoning, I narrowed it down to 3 possible tribes, and I want to share something with y'all. The Amorites, the Canaanites, they were medium to dark skinned, similar to modern Levantine and Mesopotamian peoples of today. Archaeological and genetic evidence suggests a substantial continuity that these Levant people existed since the Bronze Age. The Ge'ez speakers, the Aksumenites, I'm even pronouncing that correctly, they were dark skinned that had typical African horn features, meaning that they had the face, the nose, the lips, the hair texture of African people. And I'm sharing this because this background is literal history. Like, this is a person, this is what he existed at. These were the tribes based on the location and the time of the tribes, because there were later Hebrew tribes that were after Christ, but we're talking about this is BC. So this is a background literal history of archaeological historical evidence. And so we also need to understand when it comes to history, just as all things, history always repeats itself. This is the natural law of rhythm. Everything has already been done. There is nothing new under the sun. We just move through cycles. What goes around really goes around and comes back around. What goes up must come down. And so the first shall be last and the last shall be first. This is what is meant by that scripture. The pendulum will always swing. And people who have been conquered and held in captivity, they will always be freed. This is natural law. And so man cannot make or change or even try to control or manipulate natural law. And we are at the age of Aquarius, which is at the end of so many cycles. So back to Abraham. Although Abraham is a historical background, the story is still an allegory. So Abraham, the story of him is the plate, and the story is a spiritual meat that you must digest. In the words of my sister Danny, she says you got to eat the meat and leave the bone, right? So we about to eat the meat, but we're going to leave the bone. So we're going to leave out the fact that this is a man and arguing over any historical facts. We're going to eat the meat and leave the bones, get the meat of the story. So in Genesis, the first instruction that we know about this moral lesson that he had to go through within the mind of man that we have to go through is it says in Genesis 12, get out of thy country, get out of thy present land, the limited state of consciousness that you are in. To get into this new land, this new state of consciousness requires a new consciousness to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Later we learn this is described to us in so many ways. In order to get into this new land, it is contingent upon you entering into a higher state of consciousness and feeling that you have to match and align to get to this new land that you want to get, to this new consciousness. So this is what the translation is from a metaphysical and esoteric perspective. If we truly understand that the Bible is a basic instructions for life, it's a manual for your mind. Because as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. The dual nature of the laws is understanding the dual nature of God's blessings. There is a reciprocal energy exchange. It requires something within you to do. So you have to be wholeheartedly willing, no half-stepping, no half-assing, no bullshit when it comes to understanding and working with the divine creator, because it knows your heart. It knows when you are not being authentic. So for every blessing that we want summoned, there is a first instruction that we have to do. We have to get out of our old land, our old way of thinking. That sacred exchange is what you wish to receive. You must also meet it with aligned action. In order to go somewhere new, you got to take a foot forward. So you actually have to leave your foot from the place it is standing in. Get out of that land, get out of that space, get off that land and come into a new step. come into a new consciousness with that aligned action into that place, in that direction. The universe, God, only gives us what we have given to ourselves first. So we have to surrender to the fear of letting go, the fear of stepping forward, to release the attachment to where we're standing in the place that we're standing in, and the willingness to get out of our own way. This is what this scripture is saying. And the reason why we have to do it, if we understand, is that the cause triggers the effect. The cause of me getting out of my own land, my own consciousness, if we want to think about the metaphor of just stepping forward, what caused me to step forward? The effect of that is my body is going to continue to move. The energy is going to match that. So your offering creates a return. Energy cannot flow where there is no pathway. A blockage or something filling up in that space, then the pathway is not developed because we're not willing to create space for that pathway. Therefore, the energy cannot flow. And when we don't surrender, it creates a blockage. But when we do, it forges the circuit. It ignites what is supposed to happen in that moment, as well. The universe responds in kind, not because it owes you, but because you've completed the circle of the law of correspondence and the law of cause and effect. You've actually fulfilled the laws. The first step to redemption starts with self. From where you are, get out of your own land. And in this scripture, it also says, look from where you are in all directions, as far as you can see, as far as you can see. God wants to give you even greater than that. So what I do is, like, from wherever you are, your city, the highest point, just look out as far as you can see and understand that your human mind, your human eye can only see so far, and even further than that, because our conscious mind, our sight, our physical sight is limited. Our conscious mind is limited, but our subconscious mind is greater, and it has the ability to move things that we cannot see. And so in Genesis 13, verse 14 and 15, God reaffirms his promise to Abraham by telling him, look around and see the land. He wants to give it to him and his descendants. So this is a promise. This is one of the first promises that God gives to us. I want to give you a new consciousness. From your old way of thinking, you have the ability to restore that. And we also have to know and understand that God itself wants to move you into a new land and a new state of being. So you may feel like you're stuck within a certain particular consciousness, or a certain financial condition, or a certain relationship condition, and you're thinking that because you keep thinking that, but that's an old condition. That is the past. That's something that your thoughts created. So God actually wants to bless you in this experience, because all things that are good, pure, true, perfect, beautiful, and abundance, like, is what is the life that we're supposed to have. And so we have to step away from what is familiar, from what is comfortable, because guess what? Growth is uncomfortable, and discomfort is a sign of growth. Some of us don't even feel worthy of receiving some of the things that we want to receive. And that just is a matter of changing our self-talk. And affirmation for all of y'all that don't feel worthy, I'm going to share it with y'all right now. I am worthy and deserving of great many things. After already having seeked the kingdom within, because I know it's within me, I know that maintaining my peace, my purpose, my divine balance of thinking and feeling emotions, my energy and motion is in tune and in flow and in harmony with the universe. feel free to take that, adapt it, do whatever it is that you want, but you're reminding and aligning yourself and your energy with the way that you to begin to allow yourself to be ignited and to feel worthy. So, who are Sarah and Abraham actually? Right? When we understand the laws, we understand that whenever we're referring to the a man, we're referring to the masculine principle, and whenever we're referring to a woman, we're referring to the feminine principle, but we're also referring to emotions and our conscious way of thinking. So the story of Sarah and Abraham, or Sarai and Abram, before they became Sarah and Abraham, is a story of the journey of your mind with the juvenile male and female aspects, right? Your immature aspects. And this is where Lot comes in at, because, he was Abraham's nephew. And so this was symbolic of Abraham's juvenile nature. And so Sarai was also, both of them weren't fully emotionally developed. We've all had juvenile aspects of ourselves, right? Like some of us still got them. Some of us are going to have them for 50, 60, or 70 years until we allow ourselves to spiritually mature. And you're going to have them again if you don't in the next life. Because if we don't develop it, then eventually it has to be developed because consciousness is always expanding. And unfortunately, death is no diploma. You keep the same consciousness with you. So wherever you wake up in the next state of consciousness or body, whatever that looks like, you're still going to have the assignment that you have to do the inner work. So God made Abraham this promise to bring him into this new land, into this new state of consciousness. And he was like, hey, young nephew, you want to come with me? You know what I'm saying? And my fine ass wife, you know what I'm saying, to this new land. And his nephew was like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? I want to come with you. Due to their limited nature, both Sarai and Lot influenced Abraham so poorly. And this lets us know that the undeveloped emotion, Sarai and Lot, which stands for faith in the material, will get you into some shit and slow things down for you and be a nuisance in your life. Like it's going to delay you. Being juvenile, it will delay your progress until you mature. Together, Lot and Sarah represented insufficient equipment to sustain Abraham's faith. And basically, you know what I'm saying? He had baby faith. He had a little bit of faith. It wasn't mature. He still needed to develop. Even with all of Abraham's insufficiencies, he still tried to enter into Canaan, the promised land, right? And live there. And he even brought members of his family with him. He was like, hey, y'all come with me. He knew that it was promised, but he tried to manipulate and fulfill the prophecy. And because he tried to manipulate, it caused him to go to Egypt. He had to get kicked out and went to Egypt. And in this story, Egypt means falling into a sense consciousness, falling back into your senses, your animalistic nature, the feeling senses. So when things go off back course, we revert, if I can get it out. We revert back to default setting, right? And the default setting, unfortunately, sometimes are bad habits. Or if you're not fully mature yet, and you ain't fully developed yet, then you revert back to your juvenile state. So he stooped back to the juvenile level and just fell off of his spiritual plans right in the middle of a transformative experience. And he chose bullshit. You know what I'm saying? Like he chose the cowardly fold instead of developing courage to be refined and to go into spiritual development. But like, I think we've all done that sometimes, right? Like, have you ever done that? God call you and you make it a conference call. You know what I'm saying? You try to bring other people along with you on your purpose. I know I've done that. It's supposed to be one-on-one and you're trying to make it a three-way. I Like, especially like when people call me, like if there's somebody else listening, you want to know, right? It's a little annoying. So I feel like God be like, oh my goodness, I called you. I'm trying to have a private conversation with you and put you up on game, and you want to bring everybody with you because we aren't fully aware, we're not fully listening, we're not fully developed. And it could be, maybe it's out of pain or desperation. We're still feeling like that there's a void that we have and somehow God can't fulfill it. So we need a security blanket when the only security blanket that we need is within us. It's what created us. You know, when we do that, it really does sidetrack us because we end up performing and putting on a show, right? And like when we try to bring people along, it takes us off our path and our purpose. And it reminds me of that Lauryn Hill song when she was like, I existed for you. We end up existing for something else, like for the title, the hype, the accolades, the wanting to other people to see us for the wrong reasons. Because we're too busy pouring into our senses, we're too busy pouring into our ego, becoming extremely materialistic. You know what I'm saying? Money, hoes, and clothes is all a brother knows. Like it really becomes that life because we get caught up. And as a result of Abraham's fraudulousness, if y'all recall the story, he ends up pimping out his wife, Sarai. This fool passed his beautiful wife off to the Pharaoh as his sister. He traded her safety for his own survival. This fool threw her straight under the bus. And I was like, you know what? I've felt like that so many times, but I felt like that so many times because I threw out my own self out of survival of someone else or something else, whether that something else be an image or something else be a whatever, a promise that I'm trying to create that isn't God's promise. And so when we deny our own feelings, our own convictions, we become numb. In this moment, like he was really on some bullshit. He diverted his spiritual growth. He'd rather pretend so he could benefit from Pharaoh. He chose to manipulate the situation and take advantage of it. He was a fraud. And he was willing to do anything for it, which so many people are. He decided to manipulate and scheme like a lot of fraudulent people do because they feel like it's going to gain them the material wealth. And it oftentimes it does temporarily. And so Pharaoh, you know what I'm saying? He ended up falling in love with Sarai because she was a baddie. You know what I'm saying? And sooner or later, like it always does, what goes around comes around, what goes up must come down. The truth came to light. So it came out that Sarai wasn't his sister. And what do y'all think happened? Pharaoh kicked his ass out. He sensed that he was a fraud and Abraham was not representing himself transparently, wholeheartedly, so he got kicked out. And Pharaoh, meaning great house, the king himself. So this is the etymology of the word and the breakdown of the word Pharaoh in this analogy. So it's the supreme authority. So his higher self saw the fraudulent behavior and saw that there was trickery and the manipulation because you can't fake frequency. Pharaoh also means dominion over materialism, the ego, and bondage. The ego enslaves the higher mind. That's what Pharaoh means. It means enslavement of the higher mind through the ego. So we got to put our ego aside because our ego gives us a narrow optic view. It makes us selfish. And so there was a release. The soul was released over the soul's victory over the ego is being released of those untamed thoughts. So Abraham compromising himself. Oftentimes we do that, right? We sell ourselves out. And Sarai in this story is taken by the Pharaoh because the lower mind gets dominion over the soul's purity. She was beautiful, she was innocent. So he pimped her out and broke their divine union. So this means that when Abraham, the intellect, operates on self-preservation, on fear, it surrenders the soul, Sarai, to egoic consciousness, ego materialism. The soul becomes trapped in bondage. So when the intellect, Abraham, operates in self-preservation, fear, it surrenders the soul, Sarai, to pharaohic consciousness, ego materialism, and the soul becomes trapped in bondage. That's basically what happened in this story. And then there was a rage, right? Where it was the divine spark. Rage is so necessary, which was God's voice disrupting the ego's control. Your higher self saying, hey, what's going on here? Forcing the lower mind, the pharaoh, to relinquish its grip on the soul. And even though God promised them a child, Abraham opened himself up to Sarai's suggestion to open himself up to a handmaiden. The masculine side of him was on some bullshit, and the female side of him was on some bullshit too. And he ended up having Ishmael, Yishmael in Hebrew. Yishma means he will hear, and El meaning God, mighty one. So God is going to hear you. Your subconscious mind will hear you no matter what. It also means, Ishmael also means wild thought, the outcast mind. So the allegory interpretation of this is that the untamed restlessness aspect of human consciousness that we all have, the mind operating on survival mode and primal instinct, gets us to do some crazy shit. And guess what? God is going to hear you, and it's going to happen. So there's a difference between hearing versus rebellion. Unlike Isaac, meaning laughter and joy and divine promise of the illuminated mind, Ishmael symbolizes the struggling intellect. Questioning, wondering, worrying, it's the conflict that it has with higher wisdom. So born of Hagar, the handmaiden or the servant, this represents the materialistic mind, the unrefined ego that represents the lower part of consciousness that we have, that feels abandoned in Genesis 21, verse 14 through 16, until it learns how to surrender. So Egypt, that word means bondage to the senses to keep you down. And in this story, we have to understand that we cannot be in bondage to our senses because they're going to keep us down. We have to rest and wait on the power that is greater than ourself to bring about what it is. And if you force it, it is not going to be satisfactory fruit. You're going to end up having something outside, but you have the ability to do that. So Abraham, he realized his mistake, which allowed him to finally grow in his faith and his feeling nature, because he ended up waiting upon God, and he allowed his insufficiency to become sufficient. And the law changed his efficient faith, and he grew into Abraham. God blessed him. God is the law. It blessed him to become Abraham. The same reason that Sarai became Sarah. The feeling nature became spiritually developed. Through all of her crazy experiences with Abraham, she continued to open herself up to spiritual growth. She developed her feeling nature into one of great intuition and became Sarah, Satra, if you want to pronounce it correctly. What does this tell you about your spiritual growth? That spiritual growth happens through experience. Oftentimes, that experience is a deep, challenging one. It really is. because all things work together for the good, and we oftentimes are refined through pressure and through fire. That's what makes diamonds and gold. So when you are in a deep, challenging situation in your life, the best, most powerful thing you can do is to trust and to surrender and to wait, to ignore the senses, the feelings that are not fully developed, and trust and rest and wait on a power that is greater within you. God's anointing sharpens your discernment. And it's also important to note in this story that the changed feeling nature came first and then the changed names, not the other way around. Oftentimes we want the reward, the title, the money, the love, the car before we have the feeling nature of having it. And you can embody the feeling of it now. This is the substance of things that's hoped for. This is the faith that you have to feel. Out of the dual change of his masculine and feminine, the promised child was now born. So the promise was born because he received the blessing once he changed, once he got out of his land, once he got out of his way. And so he had Isaac symbolizing joy, symbolizing what God requires for answered prayers is a joyous, wholehearted production of your life. From wherever you are, know that God wants to bring you out of it. And from wherever you are, you have to feel joyful and know that you are being produced and developed and brought out of it through your faith, through your developing your intuition, paying attention to those soft whispers and listening instead of ignoring it, listening to your inner nature instead of your outer nature. To train yourself to be sensitive to the subtle, to be obedient to your higher self and take inspired action, not worried action, not nervous action, not anticipated, not action out of fear. If it feels rushed or if it feels like that, it's not inspired action. When you take inspired action, you shall reap and reach the promises that you seek. You shall reach the place it is that you're trying to go, whatever that action is. So energy of, energy back. You have to understand that you can't take an action, you can't make a choice to do something when it is not aligned and it's not inspired. So this is why we have to go with the added light, the added inspiration of God, the Most High, whatever you call the Creator. Put yourself in that role of being that conduit. Having faith, having the willingness to listen, having the feeling that you are going to reach your goal no matter what. Like, I ain't even got to worry about it. I'm going to reach my goal. I can continue to proceed from that assumption. All things come through you, not to you. The action cannot do the action without the energy flowed. So is the energy flowing or am I creating a blockage? Am I in my way? Where does the energy flow from? All energy flows from within. And so the other things that we need to know and understand is that God wishes to give us a new land. It's not your current situation is not due to if you're lacking, your current situation is not due to God punishing you but everything to do with your inability to accept what God has prepared because you're not fully developed yet. Juvenile divinity operates in cycles of fear, control, cheating, and shortcuts. That's how spiritually immature people operate. Abraham learned his lesson and returned to Canaan, which returned him to humility. And he became rich, and it's not just physically rich, because as within, so without, right? So he became rich within his increased faith and his spiritual wealth. and then eventually his physical wealth. And the word Canaan, the Semitic root, means to be humble. The promised land, it also means. It's a territory of the divine covenant, but it also moral testing of divine will. A place where spiritual light is concealed. It is also your divine inheritance. Canaan is not just a historical place, but also a metaphor for the soul's journey through trials, through giants, and temptations, those fleshly worship our senses, and ultimate liberation. It's a place of spiritual development that will inevitably allow you to reach your Jerusalem as our nirvana state. And Jerusalem's fulfillment is the soul's returns to oneness, where above and below unite. The illuminated mind, this is the halo. This is what Jerusalem symbolizes. And always remember, the divine mirrors back to you what you believe. And so he became rich within, so rich in his flock that he ended up being able to part with Lot. He was able to part with that juvenile aspect of himself, enabling each man to go their separate way. He's like, all right, you know what I'm saying? I'm matured. I'm putting all that behind me now. Because he developed his spiritual maturity. And he ended up taking the rocky hills of Hebron, where he chose a place where human and divine commune, where it's anchored in promise. That's what that word means. Because the hills were rocky, like it looked like he got a bad bargain. It was like, dang, Lot chose this grassy area that was convenient, all beautiful, and he chose the rocky, hilly area. But something happened. God compensated Abraham because of his great generosity, his willingness, causing him to lift his eyes to see from the heights and the higher perspective of where he was at. So where he was placed at, he was placed on a higher perspective. And this means that God can still prosper us, even though it may look that we're on a higher, rockier soil, we're still given a higher perspective. And in the story, Lot remained greedy and selfish. Like anyone who lives a life only for the material, they become grossly selfish, and negative things end up happening to them hand over fist. You ain't got to worry about people like that, which is why God says vengeance is mine. Like, because evil always destroys itself. Vengeance belongs to the law. It belongs to the law of karma. It belongs to the law of cause and effect. You don't want to get any of those effects. So don't even try to go over there and worry about what's happening to them. The neighboring tribes attacked Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot's land, and the city got robbed. And they came and stole all his flocks and all his herds. Everything that Lot had got stolen. It got jacked. And so Abraham gathered up all of his homies, and he came to rescue Lot and his family. But because Lot's wife was a trophy wife, you know what I'm saying? She was an influencer, like a lot of those materialistic men, you know what I'm saying? They get them wives, them baddies, them materialistic baddies. And so although she was rescued, she missed her old life. You know what I'm saying? She looked back. She was like, oh, I want to go back over there in my old life. She was preserved in the past. And this symbolizes that when you are free from a difficult situation, it is dangerous to look back. I don't care however the situation looks, if you are removed from a place that may felt like a kingdom, God moved you for a reason. And if you get preserved in the past, you will turn into a pillar of salt. Don't long for the past. It is so dangerous. That situation that you got of whatever it is, that job, that relationship, don't go back into the repasses of your mind and daydream about that old encounters and the fake potential, the wolf tickets and the pipe dreams. You know what I'm saying? Like, or the fantasies that you created that probably weren't even real, that wasn't even a real foundation. You might even find yourself saying, like, even though, you know what I'm saying, I was in this situation, it's better than why, because you're in the middle of transport. It's a lot more comfortable than where you are now. Don't do it. Don't do it. I had this driver's ed teacher when I was in high school, and he would always say that, don't do it. Like, whatever you got to do to stop yourself and shock yourself out of it. Because every time you doubt, you worry, and you focus on the past, it turns you into a pillar of salt. It preserves you in the past. It's a trap. It's a loop. It keeps you living in a place that is burnt down and pillaged, that doesn't even exist anymore. It's a ghost. When you're preserving your life and looking back and wishing that you had something that it doesn't even exist anymore. We have to move forward. We have to get out of the old land, our old state of consciousness. This is what the story keeps trying to tell us. The key lesson here is that the past is like a quicksand. The more you struggle with it, the deeper it consumes you. And that's why it's okay to feel pain. I'm not saying like don't feel pain, don't feel like get the lesson out of it. Don't dwell in it. Let's take a look at the journey of Abraham. So he moved from Ur of Chaldea, which is a realm of astral determinism. It's a passive realm. To Haran, to Canaan. So Ur of Chaldea, or Ur, it stood for a Babylonian moon cult. It's idolatry, right? The soul trapped in a lower astral influence. Life is where you believe that your life is predetermined by the stars. This is where that place where there was a lot of astronomers in that area, right? Where they believe that it was predestined. So if you were poor, you're just going to be poor all your life. If you were this, and this is just what you were. It was written, it was predetermined. There's nothing that you could do from it. It's that hustler mentality worldview that this is how it is, and this is the way that you have to do it. And so Haran represents the delayed crossroads, the liminal state, the transitional period of ambiguity and disorientation, where you're like, wait a minute, it seems like there could be more to this. So before the spiritual commitment, there's like a crossroads like that you have to go through. Like it's when I think of crossroads, I think of like it's giving Legba energy, and like in all traditions and all cultures, in all our allegories and parables and spiritual ones, it's telling us the same story, that when we are going through a spiritual experience within our spiritual journey as spiritual beings, that we come to crossroads internally, and there's a delay within that part. And then he moved into the land of Canaan. This is the call to separation, of isolation. If you've never been called to isolation in your life, then you ain't gone through nothing. You ain't gone through nothing. That's how you know. This is the place where your faith is tested. When your backup is against the wall and you ain't got nobody to call on but God, nobody around, nobody to fulfill, nobody to entertain you. You can't half-ass it no more. You is stripped down to nothing. You're completely isolated. Some of us have these desert situations to where all you can do is depend on God. This is where you learn that your life is not predetermined, that you play an active role as a co-creator with the Creator. In your separation and your isolation, you see the miracles and the possibilities. Divine favor is contingent upon faith and obedience and allowing the process to unfold without force and resistance. If I were to have forced this rose to bloom, it may have opened, but it wouldn't be beautiful. It wouldn't have been fully matured and developed and blossomed into what it was naturally supposed to be. I interfered with creation as if I somehow created this rose. I didn't make this, it grew. We are an active participant. I actively played in helping plant this or water it. I didn't. I didn't plant this, but a family member did, right? So my genes played an active participant. My ability to choose to plant this so it can directly shape our lives. That I can choose to have watered this. It could have directly shaped the blossoming and the unfolding of this. But did I need to get in the way to try to open this? No, absolutely not. I understood what I was supposed to do to help it blossom. And this is what we learned in our isolation in the land of Canaan, what we're supposed to do. And that comes by God and God only. And so what are you going to do when it comes to maturity and developing? Are you going to fold, or are you going to stay 10 toes down? Mature divinity operates on surrender and trust, not control or manipulation. Mature divinity operates on trust and surrender, not control or manipulation at all. It doesn't. Immature divinity wants what is done for them. They want somebody else to make them feel it, or they want to live in the material. Immature divinity wants somebody else to do it, somebody else to pay for it. I do the crime, but you do the time. That's believing that somebody else can then pay for your sins. You're still responsible for that. You are. And let's not get fooled into thinking otherwise. We got to learn that our life is not predetermined, that we play an active role in this. You are all standing on at the edge of your own Genesis. Abraham and Sarai are just like you. Once afraid, controlling, bargaining with God's promises, they stumbled, they doubted, they looked back, and they turned they got preserved in the past. But when they finally surrendered their fear into faith, their names changed. They became free, and so did their legacy. This is your invitation to step out of the loop, to stop preserving what God has told you to leave behind, to stop forcing what only God can ordain, and start trusting that the one who named you, that the one who created you, this very existence in this world, can and will provide. We just have to allow ourselves to go through the adolescence, and ain't no half stepping. You know what I'm saying? Like the song says, you do it. I know it may seem difficult, but trust me. Just trust me. You ain't even got to trust me. Just trust the stories that you've seen before. Trust yourself. You're going to have to go through it anyway. The only way out is through. And the sooner you go through it, the sooner you'll be able to come to it. You're already anointed and appointed by a king. You are all children of the Most High. What is the difference between a prince and a peasant? I'm going to ask again, what is the difference between a prince and a peasant? Training, practice. A prince goes through all the necessary schools and the trainings and all of that. What you're born into has nothing to do with what you become. Go through your training and stop avoiding the shit. The knife is in your hand. The altar is ready because you are the altar. Will you bring your past and stay preserved in it? Are you going to cling to Ishmael's, those wild thoughts, and compromise? Don't be no coward. For every blessing summoned, there is a sacred exchange. What you wish to receive, you must also meet with aligned action. The universe only gives you what you have developed and matured into first. Surrender fear and release attachments and have a willingness to step into the unknown and grow. You have to be able to be willing to step into the unknown, because as a mother, as if we're children, and as a mother, I know if when my son was 7, he wasn't mature enough to receive a car and go driving. He had to learn and develop and had to learn how to drive before he was just going to get the keys to a car. Why would I give a 7-year-old a vehicle? He'd kill himself. And God is looking at you like, I want to give you all this stuff, but I ain't giving you this car yet. Not this literal car, this spiritual car, whatever the car is. You got to allow yourself to grow, love. I promise you, it's beautiful at the end. I know it's hot. It is. But you were built for this. You got it in you. You could take the heat. Don't get your ass out the kitchen. The cause triggers the effect. Energy calls forth its match. That fire created that gold. It burnt all of those metals. It called forth the gold that was already within. Your offering, your sacrifice, it's an exchange, it's reciprocity. You got to give something to get something. Energy cannot flow where there is no pathway. Let the energy forge a circuit. Let the universe respond to its kind. Not because it owes you, but because you are fulfilling the law. Let the masculine energy inside of you lead without lying. Be the feminine that waits without wavering. Together, they don't just receive promises, they become them. Thank you for exploring the principles within me. Always remember, the universe resides within you. As within, so your world will be. We got 7 keys to unlock the light, and Satra Anuket helps make it bright. You are the light. Just be it. Shine. Until next time, peace. Be well.